we are still operating under this relic of the first industrial revolution when we can really embrace this both and model of, instead of asking, how might I be more productive today, or how might my team be more productive this quarter? A different question is, what might I cultivate today? What might my team cultivate this quarter, which is that both and model.
Welcome to Insights Unlocked, an original podcast from User Testing, where we bring you candid conversations and stories with the thinkers, doers, and builders behind some of the most successful digital products and experiences in the world, from concept to execution.
Welcome to the Insights Unlocked podcast. I'm Nathan Isaacs, Principal Content Marketing Manager at User Testing, and our guest today is Natalie Nixon. Natalie is a creative strategist, award-winning author, and CEO of Figure 8 Thinking, where she helps global organizations transform how they innovate by blending wonder, rigor, and human-centered design. Welcome to the show, Natalie.
Thank you, Nathan. It's great to be here.
Natalie, you've become well known for helping leaders rethink creativity and productivity, especially with your new book, Move, Think, and Rest, which I believe you were just telling me that it was selected as one of the best productivity books for the year. So congratulations for that.
The Next Big Idea Club selected as one of the 12 best productivity books of 2025. That's high praise. I was really thrilled to hear that.
Yeah. And it's not the only praise your book has received. I mean, you've a lot of, just somebody needs to just type your name into a Google search and they'll see all the news articles about you and the book and kind of what you're talking about and what we'll be talking about today. For listeners who may be meeting you for the first time, can you give us a quick snapshot of your journey and what led you to all this work?
Yeah, the short of it is that I've done a lot of different things, and I finally got to a crossroads in my life where I was able to merge and converge all of those varied interests and experiences. So I have a background in cultural anthropology. I have a background in education. I was a middle school English teacher in my 20s and also a university professor for 16 years. And I've worked in the fashion industry as an entrepreneurial hat designer, as well as in global sourcing for a division of the limited brands. I actually started my current company, Figure 8 Thinking, as a side hustle while I was an academic, while I was a professor. I gave a TEDx Philadelphia talk in 2014, proclaiming that the future of work is jazz. And that talk catapulted me into getting invited into companies to help them build more improvisational ways of working. And I was doing so many of these engagements. John, my husband, said, "Babe, this is a thing. You should formalize it." So I did. I created Figure 8 Thinking as a side hustle and woke up a year later and realized I'm actually having a lot of fun with my side hustle and decided to give it a try full time, have not looked back. And what I do as a creativity strategist is I help leaders and organizations catalyze creativity's ROI, because in my experience and from my perspective, there's not a fuzzy dotted line between creativity and business results. There's a solid bold line.
I still thinking about the future of work as being jazz and that sort of that improvisational nature of all that. We're big jazz fans here at the house, so
Oh, good.
I love that. We're getting ready to go we've taken our kids. We're brainwashing them into loving jazz. So we're taking them to a show here in a couple days.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
You said many people are dying a slow death at work, and that traditional notions of productivity are relics of the first industrial revolution. How should organizations rethink productivity today, especially those pushing for speed, efficiency, and constant output? Kind of like my job.
That's not bad. It's just that the ways we've thought about productivity are an either or model, right? It's either we focus on efficiency, output, speed, or we're not doing anything worthwhile. And to me, that is a relic of the first industrial revolution, which started in the mid-19th century, which radicalized everything. It changed cities and towns and transportation and little villages' relationship to the church and power dynamics, etc. And that has gotten us to where we are. The challenge is that the modes of working don't quite align anymore with that first industrial revolution model of work, which is based on you measure only what you see. It is speed based. Efficiencies only get rewarded, and it's outputs based. And so the model that I offer in my book, Move, Think, Rest, is one that's grounded in cultivation. And it is a both and model. So yes, we should care about speed and efficiency, measuring what we see, but we value the solo practitioner and the collective. We value speed and also slow. We acknowledge that, yes, we should be measuring what we can see. We also understand that there's a lot happening during dormant periods when we need to sleep on it, when things are in an incubation stage. Even in startup culture, there is this language of the incubator, right, versus the accelerator. So we live in a time where we can work differently because of technology, AI, robotics, automation, which is taking over basic tasks. The opportunity that I am provoking us to take a look at is the so what behind all of this speed, because we can get the answers more quickly. So the so what is that now we actually have time for deeper critical thinking, for collaboration, for eyeball to eyeball conversations, to really embrace the liminal space, the ambiguity that comes when you are on the verge of discovery instead of just trying to rush through it and charge through it. So that's what I mean when I say we are still operating under this relic of the first industrial revolution, when we can really embrace this both and model of, instead of asking, how might I be more productive today, or how might my team be more productive this quarter? A different question is, what might I cultivate today? What might my team cultivate this quarter, which is that both and model.
And I was joking about myself, but, and maybe I'll include myself in our broader audience, which are designers. I mean, they are creators. They're designers, marketers, product leaders, even researchers are creative in how they're tackling their work. And I'm just wondering, what would it look like for them to operationalize your framework, your Move, Think, Rest framework? When we sort of made ourselves so efficient that I can't think of how I'm going to slow down to marinate those big ideas, right? When there's a part of me and I'm a former newspaper reporter, where I was writing 5 stories a day, I don't know how to slow down to really do that. What should I or other people be thinking about when they do this?
Well, first, let me just address, this is just not to put too fine a point on it, but if you know a little bit about my work, you know that I don't like to ghettoize creativity as only something that artists or designers are great at. So I love that you point out the researchers are also creative, right? There's a difference between art and creativity, between design and creativity. So to me, I've developed something called the Wonder Rigor Method, which is an on-ramp for everyone to realize that to be human, part of our birthright as humans is to be creative. So the best CFOs and attorneys and accountants and designers and coders and farmers, teachers, plumbers are super creative when they're doing this toggling between wonder and rigor to solve problems. I just wanted to highlight that. But to operationalize the Move, Think, Rest human-centered operating system just requires some intentionality. It requires, like with all crossroads, to acknowledge there's a different way, that maybe the ways we've been going about it don't serve us in an optimal way. And so operationalizing Move, Think, Rest first requires that we understand what this human-centered operating system is. So the first thing, it's not a siloed process. It's not first you move, then you think, and then you rest. It's very integrative. Movement refers to movement hygiene. So operationalizing movement throughout the day means that we occasionally are standing while we're working. We make sure that we calendar in buffers to step away from the desk, to, if we're in a building, if we're confined to a building, take the stairs. If we have the ability to walk outside, sometimes we think, oh, I don't have time to take a walk because we think a walk has to take 30 minutes. Just like we assume for some reason that a meeting should be 30 minutes long. Says who, right? We've got to challenge a lot of assumptions, but I have walks that take 3 minutes long. I have walks that I know will take 7 minutes. If I'm feeling, but I have particularly a lot of time budgeted in the day, I could take a 15 to 30 minute walk. But the point is, when we move, our ideas move, and the spinal cord is an extension of the brain. So when we are seated, cramped over our laptop or our computer for even more than 40 minutes. And this is according to research by neuroscientist Dr. John Medina. He's written an incredible series of books called Brain Rules. We actually are not doing our best thinking because when we sit cramped over, blood flow gets restricted to the brain. And if there's less blood flow, there's less oxygen to the brain, which means we're not doing our better thinking. So movement hygiene is integrating movement and how you run a meeting. The Navy has run standing meetings for years. And by the way, the Navy's SEALs are famous for having said that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So the ability to slow down is actually advantageous because when we slow down, we zoom out. But the movement part of the operating system is about movement hygiene. The thinking part is really about valuing what I call backcasting and forecasting. So backcasting is about memory, reflection, metacognition. Why do I think the way I think? Forecasting is about inspiration, curiosity, dreaming, daydreaming. When I talk about thinking in the Move, Think, Rest operating system, I'm talking about backcasting and forecasting. So backcasting is about reflection and memory and metacognition. Why do I think the way I think about XYZ? Forecasting is about daydreaming, dreaming, imagination, inspiration. And if you notice, those modalities of thought, backcasting and forecasting, requires us to slow down, and they're actually essential for that super sharp, rational, cognitive decision making that we all long for, that we're rewarded for, gets incentivized. So a lot of what I write about Move, Think, Rest is shifting around the way we think about incentivization plans, around our KPIs, around ways to operationalize, institutionalize, and integrate these different modalities of working. The rest piece is about intermittent rest. And I interviewed 58 people for the book. I was very interested in how people current state are integrating breaks, micro breaks throughout the day, but also scaling it out to sabbatical. So it was really cool to interview people who are for nonprofit organizations, tech companies that are granted a sabbatical every 5 years. The challenge is that not everyone takes the company up on that offer because it's not always modeled by leadership, right? So much of these shifts in behaviors are, they're low-hanging fruit. It's actually not a big leap or shift necessarily to make these changes in movement and movement hygiene and backcasting and forecasting for thought, or an intermittent rest, whether it's talking about a day, a week, or a whole year, but it's about how it's modeled in leadership, how we think about hiring and retaining practices, how we think about key performance indicators. And in the book, I write about, where do you start? You start with key KPEs or key performance experiences. And you start by prototyping. You know all about prototyping. You can prototype not just products, but you can prototype experiences and services. So you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, we're not going to run any of our meetings in the same way. No. What is one monthly or every other week sort of meeting that you could switch up, and who leads the meeting? How do you begin it and end it? Where does it occur? We have the artifacts in our organizational culture to begin experimenting with these new and different ways of working, and then collect feedback from each other, from our colleagues, and see how it's going and see what we want to tweak and develop.
Well, I love all that. And I'm just reminded of a few things as you were talking about that. This idea of short walks, or walks where you can be doing the work. And I think back to, I'm not going to remember his name for whatever reason, Apple's co-founder, who was known for
not Tim.
Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs,
excuse me.
would take, they would go with the engineers and they would walk about the campus or whatever it might be and get the work done that way. And I think that's great. I also think, and I'm going to give myself a compliment, but that's not the intent here. But people like myself, where we're super efficient with our work, right? We're pounding it out. We're also super efficient with our time off, right? We don't actually slow down even in those cases. And I'm thinking about that. And I do long distance bike riding. So I'm like, oh yeah, take a few days off, plan a 500-mile bike ride. That's not really,
Right.
that's not really slowing down. So I think
But, in your defense, I will say you have to be self-aware. You need to be compassionate with yourself. So I used to, before, when you write a book, you learn a lot. You have to talk to a lot of different people. I research. And, I used to think I'm horrible at meditating. I am a superb daydreamer. I love daydreaming. I take daydream breaks. I recommend that everyone takes daily daydream breaks. If it's just one a day, set your timer for 90 seconds, stand by a window, watch the clouds drift. Daydreaming is really essential for divergent thinking to activate the default mode network so that when you return to the work at hand, your thinking is actually much clearer. Different neural synapses are at work where all the juicy bits of productivity happen. But I used to think I was really not great at meditation until, as I was researching the book, I learned there's also a type of kinesthetic meditation. So I am a swimmer. And so when I'm swimming laps, I'm sure this happens for you on the road when you're just cycling, you get into flow state because you're focused, right? And you get out of your head into your body. And that is a way of breaking away from that overburdened cognitive load and the neocortex. So I think that's fair. I think it's totally fair.
That's yeah. Well, also, but also my takeaway is like you have to have some intent about all of this. What you're talking about is and that might be one of my takeaways. Yes, I do spend a lot of time just saying, oh, how did that 10 miles just go by? It's because I was in that sort of meditative state, just going down the straight road and just thinking about life and work and whatever it might be.
But Nathan, do you find that sometimes when you come back from those rides, a challenge that had stymied you or a place where you felt stuck, it's something you weren't thinking about it consciously, but do you find that sometimes things suddenly will click together, or you'll think of someone will pop to you that you should call and talk to who could be helpful in the conundrum?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's always a to-do list to come back, and all that sort of is filtered out, right? You've been able to kind of make sense of a lot of things that are going on, and you got to quickly write down all that so you don't lose it, or else you have to go out for another bike ride and remember.
Oh shucks.
You kind of talked about this when you talked about starting Figure Eight, and this point of like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm at a turning point here. How can leaders recognize early signals of burnout within themselves or their teams before it becomes a crisis?
Well, unfortunately, within ourselves, there's that wonderful book, The Body Keeps the Score. The body knows, the body will tell you. And in my own personal burnout moment, I was doing my dream job. I loved my work, but sometimes what happens when we love our work and it's a passion project, at least in my case, I wasn't really good at setting boundaries for my personal space, for my own personal rejuvenation, for my time. And I was walking down the hallway around 5:15 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon from the photocopier. I was a professor at the time. I was the founding director of a really cool strategic design MBA program. And I was walking down the hallway with my arms full of folders of papers to grade. And I heard someone say out loud, "I don't want to do this." And it was a really terse voice through gritted teeth. And that voice was my own. And I could not bottle it up anymore. It surfaced and it tumbled out of my mouth. And I walked into my office. I closed the door. I sat down. I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to have to reckon with this, because the other piece in my career building is that I've always followed my heart. I received an incredible gift from my parents when I was a sophomore in college. trying to figure out what I would major in. I didn't want to disappoint them. I wanted to get a really good job at the end of a very expensive education. And the short of it is, as I was talking in circles about majors I thought sounded impressive because they know me well, they said, well, what are you interested in? And I confessed, I love anthropology and these Africana studies classes are so cool. And almost at the same time, they said, that's what you should study. And my father said, Natalie, if you study what you love, you'll have to turn away opportunities because no one will have to tell you to get up earlier, stay later, work harder. And it was like this load lifted off my shoulders. And it was this permission slip, which probably to their chagrin at different times in my life, I kept following their advice to follow my heart. And so when that burnout moment happened for me, I reckoned with it, which doesn't mean it was easy, but I acknowledge I couldn't keep stifling in this friction between work that had once fulfilled me, but was now starting to deplete me. And I think if we're leaders, if we're managers of teams, we have to be cognizant of the boundaries that we are setting for our team. Hopefully we are setting boundaries and respecting those boundaries. It's not enough to say no emails over the weekend, but then you are sending an email every now and then, or you're a little snappy or short with people if they don't respond at, 10:30 p.m. at night or something like that. So I think we have to use our words. We have to collectively and collaboratively, I think, design rules of engagement as a team. For example, when I facilitate, I always start with rules of engagement, which are pretty lighthearted, like, only blue sky thinking, but also some things that are pretty important, like actively listening. And I always invite people in, what have I missed? What do you want to make sure that we adhere to in our time together? And I think the same bodes really well when you're leading a team, because when people have buy-in, they are much more likely to acquiesce. They're much more likely to be engaged. So setting some collective rules of engagement is really important. And then, leadership is increasingly inside out work. So it's making sure you practice what you preach. And if you are taking care of yourself and attuned to your emotional recovery, in addition to the mental and physical, please be attuned to those with whom you're working. If you see that people are struggling or they seem to be taking a lot of longer hours, ask questions. I just had a conversation, can't remember with whom, just the other day. It was just last night. I was catching up with a friend over a cocktail, and she was saying that there's someone who she would love to groom in her office because she's going to be moving on to take over the role. But she notices that this person makes a lot of assumptions about interpreting people's behaviors. And she'll ask the person, well, did you ask her? Did you ask her if she would like to get extra training and XYZ? Well, no. I mean, she doesn't seem like she does, but ask her, and it turned out this person totally would be open to extra training in this particular, they would love it if someone else could partner with them so they could share the work. So we have to use our words. We have to be self-aware. We have to ask questions. But it actually does start with how we are monitoring our own behavior.
I'm also thinking, as I'm hearing you say that, ask those questions. Ask what may be behind this burnout, right? It could be that they've plateaued.
Yep.
My kids, the school, I don't, you'll tell I don't approve of this, but they have this initiative they're starting this week where they want all the middle schoolers in their seats on time when the bell rings, instead of just in the hallways dragging in. And that makes total sense, especially with the limited actual education time that they get. But they're like, if you do this, we'll give you a reward at the end of the week. If you don't, you get punished by going to silent study hall. And I'm like, well, what is it about the first periods for all these classes? Make them more interesting, right? Like, if you don't have to give candy, but what's that equivalent in education, right? Make it something that they want to be in their seats, type of thing. But instead of looking for that punishment, we're going to force you into this behavior because we think that's the right. Well, I know it when I do that with my kids. Sure, I can get it, but they're not learning anything. They're not changing their behaviors. They just know that they're not going to get in trouble. That's
right. I think that's a really good point. And I think that points out that the role of gamification, not that everything has to be a game, but really what is play? Play is a big area of behavior in terms of work that I explored in Move, Think, Rest. And I interviewed Brendan Boyle, who is a toy designer. He teaches a course on play at Stanford D School. And I went out to Stanford, observed the class, participated a bit in the class, interviewed Brendan, and he defines play as engagement. The reason why the kids are so engaged out in the hallway, they're playing. How could you integrate play in class? And some people think, well, learning isn't about play. Well, let's unpack what play is. Play is about curiosity. Play is about active listening. Play is about collaboration. It's about experimentation. It's about negotiation. When we are at play, we're doing all of those things. I was always bored in history classes in high school because, number one, as a Black girl, there was never anyone they talked about who remotely seemed to be like me. So I was like trying to figure out, like, why are all these dudes the only ones who are always interesting? So that was one thing. But man, if I learned the way some YouTube channels talk about history, if I could learn in terms of story and just because people are a trip historically. So if we taught history and like the whimsical and odd ways that people behave, that's a much more engaging way and playful way for people to learn. That's why Hamilton, the musical, has been such a hit. I mean, that people are learning incredible American history by learning the lyrics to music and to rap songs. So it's experimentation is key. Mix it up a bit.
Yeah. That kind of leads us to another next question here. So like you've talked about how creativity is an ROI driver, not a nice to have, and outline how it fuels innovation and business impact. Can you share any examples for our listeners on that?
Yeah, so there is a clear business ROI between creativity and innovative return on investment for organizations. So one example is when you commit to building the creative capacity of yourself, of your team, and of your organization, you necessarily have to engage in much more inventive thinking and imaginative ways to explore the problem at hand. And when you engage in more inventive thinking, you identify variations in your product offering and the service offering and the experiences that you're delivering. Maybe you decide to, instead of selling experiences, you're going to productize it or vice versa. And that leads to new revenue streams. That's a business result. Draw a line between inventive thinking and new revenue streams. Another example of the business ROI of creativity is that when we collaborate, creativity increases. Now, most of us, if we're honest, despise collaboration because we think, why do we have to bring these people in? We're fine skipping along the way we've always done things around here. But when we collaborate long-term, collaboration, it challenges our assumptions. It ultimately increases productivity. When productivity goes up, efficiencies go up. And when efficiencies go up, costs go down. That's a business result that you can link between collaboration, which is an essential ingredient in creativity, and lowering costs. And then a third example that highlights the business ROI of creativity is that an essential underpinning of creativity is curiosity. It's being able to ask very different sorts of questions. P.S. We get better at asking questions when we collaborate, either because questions are being asked of us or we need to understand why our colleague does it this way and not our way. And so we just get better at priming questions, learning the difference between convergent questions, which are like who, what, when, where, and divergent questions, which are why, and what if, and I wonder. And both sorts of questions are important. But when we ask more questions, we no longer are obsessed with our beautiful little baby, the trinket that we've made over the past 14 years, and we fall in love with the problems our customers have. We turn that curiosity to problem finding, problem definition. And when we do that, that often leads to greater brand loyalty and increased market value. And that's a business result.
Mm. As I'm thinking, many companies are great at tracking. Again, it's this focus on efficiency, focus on customer metrics, but you've also argued that we need inside out work and intuition to truly understand people. How can teams blend quantitative data with intuition and lived experience? How can teams blend quantitative data with intuition and lived experience to reach more meaningful insights?
Well, the truth is they already are integrating qualitative intuition with the quant. We just are afraid to say it out loud. There really is no such thing as objectivity, even when we're doing quantitative research, which is essential for understanding what are the patterns, right? Let's say the quantitative research results are collected through survey data. Well, the way people answer surveys is self-reporting, right? So if I answer a survey, if a company's trying to decide if they should open a new gym, a gym membership company in my community, and they send out a survey, and one of the questions is, how often do you go to the gym each week? I say, I go to the gym 5 days a week. That might be a false positive, and they built this gym and then no one comes, or not at the frequency they thought, because they didn't integrate it with qualitative research, right? So the first nudge, the intuition would be like, okay, looks like in this community, 78% of the people go to the gym 5 days a week. That's incredible. Is that really true? Right? So the qualitative research, which is the worm's eye view, does deep observation and interviews and contextual inquiry. And they observe, actually she goes maybe 2, at most 3 days a week. And it has nothing to do with the gym. It's more about childcare issues, or it's more about transportation. So then you might do an interesting mashup and realize, what if we are the first group of gyms that offers round-the-clock childcare, or make sure we do a partnership with the local public transportation authority, whatever, the point is that if we only stop at the quantitative, we're fooling ourselves. If we don't acknowledge those nudges that come when we don't have the proof yet, but there's just like what I call a blip on the radar screen, we have to investigate that. And I started observing the role of intuition and strategic decision-making when I was a professor of the strategic design MBA program. We would invite in startup leaders on our Friday night design and dine evenings. And to a successful startup leader, when they would be sharing their origin story, there was always this moment when they would say, something told me not to do the deal, or something told me to work with her and not him. And I kept hearing that something told me so often. I thought, I think that something is intuition, but we don't touch intuition in business school and medical school and law school. Every successful leader has those moments, those inflection points. So what's really exciting is now that there is more neuroscience research studies that have that I write about and Move, Think, Rest that show the connection between intuition and strategic decision making. So there was a study, I think it was I'm going to get the date wrong, so I'm not going to say the date, but there was a study that basically that's called the heartbeat detection experiment, and it's really looking at something called interoception. So as humans, we are sense-making sentient beings. We have something called proprioception, which is your awareness of where you are in space. And we have something called interoception, which is your awareness of your inner state of being. So proprioception, dancers are really good at proprioception, or skateboarders are really good at birds that can like zoom through the sky and like nail landing on a branch through a thicket of barbed branches, right? They're really good at proprioception. Interoception is, I'm cold, I'm hot, I'm tired, I feel safe, I feel hungry. And interoception is powered by the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve in the body. It extends from the brain down through the heart and lungs and into the gut. So when we say things like my gut is telling me, it literally is. We literally have a neural highway system linking our brain, our heart, our lungs, and the gut. And the heartbeat detection study asked people to sit in a chair with their feet on the ground and their hands on their lap. And they were asked to tap out on their lap their heartbeat rate, not by putting their fingers on their wrist to detect a pulse. And some people are outstanding at this. They can just sit very stilly and they just begin to tap out their heart rate. And other people are like, what do you mean? I can't do that. But that's called interoceptive awareness and interoceptive accuracy. And so the experiment went on to find that people with high levels of interoceptive awareness are tuned to that inner state, also are really good at accurate strategic decision making in high stakes environments. And that experiment blew my mind because it demonstrated that this is not woo woo, that there is now scientifically documented connections between our interoceptive awareness powered by our vagus nerve, which is responsible for our intuition, and rational cognitive strategic decision making in intense high stake environments. So in our work environments, one of the things I suggest that we start is we just talk about it more, that have managers just share moments when they have married the data that's on the Excel sheet with that nudge and what was the result, and just having more open conversations about how those occurrences are a lot more frequent than maybe we want to admit.
Yeah, as we wrap up, and we can't get through an episode without talking about AI. Now, many teams worry about AI, that they worry that it will either speed them up to an unsustainable level or flatten their creativity. And you argue the opposite, that AI can be a co-creator that sparks wonder and deeper thinking. What does it look like for a product or design team to work with AI in a way that enhances rather than replaces human creativity?
What it looks like is ensuring that the AI tool or app is not the end point. I'm ensuring that it's just the beginning, that it could be a launch pad. And from there, turn it off, have the eyeball to eyeball conversations, collaboration. So for example, I study ballroom dance, and my teacher and I were talking about how some of the AI generated music is sneakily really good. Like you can't even tell if it was if it was composed by, sung by in air quotes, a human or a machine. And in my book, The Creativity Leap, there's a second edition coming out in 2026. And what's making it new is I have a new chapter that explores what does creativity look like in a time of AI. And I look at in the arts, especially, there's the jazz musician like Herbie Hancock, who was always super experimental. Back in the 70s and the 80s, he was exploring and experimenting with electronic music. He has dove, quickly into AI. He loves the experimentation he can do. There's another musician, composer who I reference in the new chapter, who was on a podcast talking about she has a love-hate relationship between it. But my dance teacher and I were talking about this, and we were saying that we were listening to an AI generated rap, which was really good. And I can't rap. I'm not good at rap. But I was thinking, if I was a rapper and I had a few phrases that were just at the beginning point, and I put it into the AI tool to churn out the beginnings riffs of something, as I think that's fair game if that you don't end there, if that becomes your co-creator, your instigator, your rap battle person, so to speak, where you're going back and forth and you're riffing with the technology. I think that could be super interesting. The challenge is, what about young people who don't know music theory yet, or don't know the basics of grammar and writing, for them to be able to start with the analog, to know the rules so that they can break them, I think is what really matters. Otherwise, we'll get really lazy and we actually will not be co-creating with the technology.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking about as you were sharing that story. And I was thinking about, like, Herbie, I believe he played with Miles Davis before he, verged off on his solo career. Picasso was could paint me to look like an exact picture before he went off into cubism, and so on and so forth.
Rothko, before Rothko was doing just the fields of color, if you look at early Rothko, very intricate figurines and streetscapes that he was doing before, and then he went into abstraction. So we got to know the rules to be able to break them.
Yeah. That's a great way to end the show. I thank you so much for joining us today, and I enjoyed our conversation. How can someone learn more about you? How can they get the book? How can they follow your thought leadership and what you're doing over at Figure 8?
Yeah, well, go to figure8thinking.com. That's the word figure, the number 8, thinking.com. Definitely sign up for the Wonder Rigger newsletter. It's a monthly newsletter that we share. I have monthly blogs that are available on the website. So the first place to start is figure8thinking.com. And then they should follow me on LinkedIn because I share a lot of content on LinkedIn as well.
Natalie, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nathan. This was a pleasure.